Creating your own reality. Is it possible for me? I am Jennifer K. Hill, the Consciousness Architect, and I am here to tell you that it's not only possible, it's closer than you might think. Welcome to the show. Hello, friends, and welcome back for another episode of Regarding Consciousness. I am Jennifer K. Hill, CEO of OptiMatch, App, and so happy to be here with you as we continue to deep dive into consciousness and all of the different ways that our consciousness, as well as the global consciousness, impacts our lives. Today, we have a brilliant thought leader joining us, Tracy Yates. So, a little shout out to Justin Breen, who connected us. I'm so grateful, as always, for these wonderful thought leader connections that I get introduced to from around the world. Tracy is a long-standing eight-figure founder and guide to visionary entrepreneurs, as well as leaders who want to reach new realms of wealth. As the creator of Omni Visioneering, she weaves decades of steering the world's most iconic brands with innovative strategies and the realization of boundless human potential. Her clients don't merely grow, they redefine what's achievable in business and in life. Tracy has catapulted hundreds of Fortune 100 leaders, spiritual luminaries, and mission driven entrepreneurs to triple their revenue and unlock extraordinary freedom across all of life's dimensions. What unites these individuals is their shared dedication to uplift humanity and commitment to realize their most audacious vision. Tracy, thank you for being here with us today.
So good to be with you.
I just ever since you and I had our first call probably 8 or 9 months ago, it was just kismet, and we're like, "Oh, kindred spirit. How can we play in this sandbox of consciousness more together?" And I love that that's what you do at a business level. You help people with expanding their consciousness as visionaries, as leaders, as entrepreneurs. Tell our listeners a little bit about your story and how you this came to be your life's work.
Yeah, we've also talked about a lot about non-linearity, and I would say that my path has been nothing but non-linear. My very first actually career, and I didn't realize that I would be using it now, but I was a futurist and
Mm,
I was connecting the dots and the patterns that was going on in the world and bringing those together to help companies lead with design and strategies, products and services that would be helping them in their business going forward. So I then actually went into building my own brand strategy and marketing agency.
mm,
And I ultimately bootstrapped that company, supporting Fortune 100 companies like Google and Disney and Apple and Visa and many others. And then I ultimately sold that company to do what I'm doing now, which is helping other visionaries become their infinite self.
mm. And what do you think is the secret? How do we become our infinite selves?
Mm. Gosh, the secret. I love that you use that word. Everyone has that ability within them. I don't think there's a secret. I think there first needs to be a desire to do that. And most of the people that I work with are similar to what we talked about, very nonlinear, right? They're visionaries. They've accomplished a lot in their lives, but they're not satisfied with what I would call the status quo. And excuse me, they have a big vision living inside of them. And oftentimes it's difficult to bring it forward into life, into reality, into form, because it hasn't been done before. And what I have found in business is that we tend to focus on the how, the strategies, and the tactics. And while certainly that is important, an important piece in business, but it's not the place to start.
Mm,
And there's a saying, you can't see what you can't see, you don't know what you don't know. And so that's one of the things that I really love doing is illuminating those opportunities to my clients that they've never even considered before. And it's finding the missing piece and plugging that into the puzzle, if you will, that generates 200 and 300% growth in under a year.
Wow, that's incredible. So, what is this higher frequency of success that you're alluding to?
Yeah, it is what I would call flow plus high performance.
Hmm.
Sort
Those
of the
oxymorons. I'm going to on behalf of the audience here. Tell us, how can flow and high performance coexist in the same realm?
Yeah, I think if you marry them together, they actually become easeful. They're a perfect harmony. So high performance to me is not pushing harder and doing more. And I find that a lot of traditional self-improvement, personal development, it's all about doing more. And to me, when you marry those together, when you marry flow and high performance, it's a natural, it's innate, it comes out of you and it's easeful and it's fun. It's not pushing hard, it's without the resistance. So to me, that's what a higher frequency of success is. And also doing what you can only do in this world, really tapping into that innate genius within you that you would just do what you're doing because you love it so much anyway. To me, those are the kind of the components, if you will. So that's how I see them interconnected.
What I'm hearing you say is that if we're forcing something too much, if we're resisting something that is a certain way or is not a certain way, that either one of those can lead to lack of flow or lack of high performance, if I'm hearing you correctly.
Absolutely. I This is the analogy I use. Have you ever gone on a walk on a beach and it's really windy out and you're walking into the wind?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And it's like you're pushing against the wind. But then when you turn around and walk back the other way, the wind is behind you and it's propelling you forward.
Mm.
So that's how I would describe resistance. And we all have resistance. So it's getting rid of that resistance. And at the end of the day, it's understanding who you really are and tapping into that vision, the true visionary that you are.
So speaking of resistance, I'm going to offer you something called positive resistance on this, or but like a fun thing. So positive resistance is anybody you talk to. If resistance, like you said, is like the wind blowing you forward, isn't there also positive resistance doing the thing that's hardest for us? Because sometimes it might feel like I don't want to fundraise, for example. It's hard, it's challenging, and you do it even though there's resistance, because on the other end, you can build something greater. Or another great example is like I had a client I was coaching lately who I encouraged to triple her prices. And she did. And she just booked her client, her first client at triple her normal rates. And so it really was, there was a lot of resistance there. So, what's the difference between good versus bad resistance, or is there even good versus bad? Like, how do we know when everything's lining up, like the stars are aligned? I've had other clients I talk to, and they're like, Jen, my business is divinely protected. I just know it. And they just feel like everything's in flow, where some people might feel like it's a little bit more, oh, like a little bit more hard to get there. How do we know if when we should stop or when we're meant to push through?
Yeah. What you described, I call contrast. So I think it's a little bit of semantics,
Okay.
right? But we could call that good resistance, if you will, right? And we all experience contrast. If we didn't, we would not evolve and grow, right? We wouldn't. We would just be coasting and coasting. So there is a level of contrast that is necessary. But if you are not moving through the contrast, if it keeps bumping up and bumping up, to me, that's then a sign to say, okay, there's a different way, maybe, of doing something. Maybe there's a different application of doing something because maybe the way you're doing it is not really in flow for you. Doesn't
Beautiful.
mean the thing, right? The fundraising, if you will, we'll use that example, doesn't mean the fundraising isn't necessarily for you. Most of the time, it's how you're going about it. And that really comes down to, I think, expanding your consciousness. It's changing your perspective. When you change your perspective around something, it not only changes you, but it changes the actual thing.
Mm. Yeah, it's all about I love that. I was reading a book somebody had recommended to me lately called How to Win at the Game of Life. And there was a great quote I was sharing with one of my coaching clients earlier today. And it was, I have a wonderful business in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service for wonderful pay. I was like, oh my God, it's just so cute. I just love it. I have wonderful business or work in a wonderful way. I give wonderful service for wonderful pay. And that's the thing is we have this internal critic or dialogue that's there. And I know you talk too about this self development kind of train we find ourselves on. Oh, I just need to go do one more class. Or if I listen to one more podcast, then I'll reach enlightenment. How do we get out of that vicious cycle and actually onto a new track altogether?
Yeah. I have found that it's not about focusing on the three-step process or the five morning routines, right? It because everything comes from within. So the antidote to that is curiosity, not
Mm.
learning. Learning is different. Learning is feeding the intellect, but curiosity. Why is this showing up for me? Not focusing on the outcome of if I do this, I will get this. That's linear. Go ahead.
How do we shift that thinking from the traditional linear for those people who might be coming from a linear perspective? I hear the yeah, buts, like everybody's grabbing on the yeah, but.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this goes back to expansion of consciousness, which is really seeing from a different perspective. If you, let's take, I'm trying to think of an example. Let's take a diamond. If you looked at a diamond in one way, it would look a certain way. But if you turned the diamond and you saw it from another perspective or viewpoint, it would also look different. If you
Hmm.
saw it from the top, if you saw it from underneath. So to me, that's really about expanding our consciousness is moving outside of our fixed identities and our fixed beliefs of how we think things must be. Like rule breaking in a way.
Yeah, it's so true. I remember there was a thought leader development group that I was in a couple of years back. And one of our exercises, our homework or play work, if you will, was to go home that night and to crawl around on whatever hotel floor or wherever we live. And that the only way we could engage for at least, I think it was 30 minutes, was the exercise with that entire room was from our hands and knees. And it gave you a totally different perspective of the room, of yourself, just to see things from a different perspective.
Yeah. And to me, that's where curiosity comes in. My favorite question is to ask, why not?
Mm,
Why not this way? Why not? Why couldn't it be this way? And I think, again, that really comes down to being curious and moving outside of the train that we're on of we do this and then we get that.
mm. Yeah, it's almost transactional. I would call it the transactional train that we inadvertently find ourselves on in life. I go to school. I get good grades. One day,
Yeah.
if I'm lucky, I go to college, and if I'm even luckier, I go get a higher degree. Or luck is has nothing to do with this. And then maybe one day I get a job, and maybe that job pays me well. I remember my parents were aghast when I left my six-figure a year job in my early 20s, or I think it was like mid 20s, to go open up my own business, which by the way, epically failed. The first one I ever opened was like, I went from making $200,000 in a year to $5,000. One of the greatest learning experiences. But sometimes in life, failure can also be a great teacher, and it doesn't have to be linear. It's like our greatest failures can also lead to our greatest successes.
100%. Yeah, and I think we with all the innovation that is going on in the world, and that can be technology, right? AI, that can also be in economic like crypto, blockchain. It can
Mm.
be the conscious we are in a I think a conscious revolution right now where people are understanding and asking much deeper questions. Is this it? And to me, it's in somewhat inspired by a meaning crisis and generational shifts, right? So all of these things are happening. And I think they're happening for us. And again, that's a perspective,
Mm,
right? And to me, that opens up a whole new level of opportunity. And after 26 years of entrepreneurship, I have found there's really two skills that are on the highest of the list for me, which is resiliency.
mm,
And that is 100% fostered from within, and imagination, seeing opportunities where others see obstacles.
mm.
And I think those are some of the key traits in entrepreneurship.
So let's imagine whether somebody is an entrepreneur or not, how can we shift ourselves to get to a place of prosperity? Because again, going back to what I hear from the clients I work with and the people I've talked to and just the humans that are in the world is, yeah, but I need to survive. Yeah, but I have kids. I don't have the emotional luxury of wondering about things, being opening a business. I can barely put food on the table. How would we encourage somebody who might be going through that experience to be able to still have the same level of prosperity no matter where they came from in the world, whether somebody's listening to this show in West Africa or in Asia or in the United States or Europe, that equally any person around the world could tap into this? What would be the advice you would give them?
Yeah, I first my advice would be to define what prosperity is.
No.
To me, prosperity is the abundance of all, not just money.
Mm,
Now I understand that our in order to survive and thrive in our current world, it does require money. So I honestly would say tap into your imagination because there are always ways to generate money. Maybe they might not be on the top of your list of what you desire to do, but that also can be a step in the direction of where you want to go. And I think it's moving out of that linear path and thinking, oh, if I do this, then I'm completely off my path or off path to getting where I want to go. Cause you never know what that step is unveiling in you, the opportunities, the people, etc. And to me, opportunities are prosperity.
mm. Yeah, and I think intuition plays a big role in this. I was just listening to again that book called How to Win at the Game of Life, and it's an old book. I'm not particularly religious myself. There's a little bit of religious undertone, fair warning in that book for anybody, but you can just listen for the value in it. She gave a great story in the book of a client who came to her with dollars left to her name. And she said, I have nothing. I need you to like bless me and help me to figure out how to become prosperous. And she lived in New York at the time. And she said, the person who wrote the book said, "Hey, where do you intuitively feel like the most money is going to come to you?" And it made no sense for her. She said, "Going home." Now, home was very far away from New York, very far away from where logically, linearly prosperity would normally make sense. And she said, "Do that. Always follow those inner hunches and intuitive vibes of where you're meant to go, etc." So the woman takes her last $8, just barely enough car fare to get down there, and gets down there, and then within a few weeks gets more abundance than she had ever had. And so part of it too is following those breadcrumbs of synchronicity and wonder and miracles and following the direction that leads us one way rather than chasing the breadcrumbs that are going to lead us over a proverbial cliff.
Oh, absolutely. I love the book Game of Life, though. I think that is a great book. She's definitely a prophet in her time.
Right?
Um, yeah, for sure. Absolutely. I think that goes back to knowing ourselves because we can't hear and let alone listen or follow our intuition if we're not in tune with ourselves.
Yeah, that's it, and that's it. Everything comes back to the self. It's so funny. This is an embarrassing but not embarrassing, I don't care. I love to watch Disney movies, funny movies, like, those are my favorite, or, like, adventure, like Indiana Jones. And I had some wonderful opportunities for growth this last weekend where I was just feeling mentally challenged and frustrated by different things. So I tell my husband on the plane ride back, I said, "Honey, I wanna watch a funny movie. What about Dungeons& and Dragons?" And I just love it, and so we're watching the movie, spoiler alert, and the greatest, like, the sorcerer, they need the sorcerer who can defeat the best sorcerer in the world, but he has to, like, align with his helmet, and he's fighting against his great-grandfather who's telling him, "You're not enough, you'll never be enough, you suck." And then all of a sudden, he realizes in that moment, he is enough, and the vision of his grandfather, this wonderful sorcerer, transforms into himself, and all along, it hadn't been his grandfather he'd been battling or anybody else, he had always been battling himself.
Absolutely. And I would say that probably 90% of creating wealth does come down to us, right? It may be manifested through the job that we do, but how did we get that job? How do we get inspired to apply for that job, right? Or how do we get inspired to start this company? Or how are we, right? So it all comes down to us. And I think that's what we're all learning together.
Mhm. Yeah, is that we're all a reflection of one another, it's so true. So Tracy, tell us, is there anything I didn't ask you today, or any last bit of wisdom that you would love to leave our listeners and our viewers with today? Any thoughts that are being channeled to you right now?
I would say that in order to use your imagination, first you have to and get the idea that wasn't there before, is you have to be open to receiving it.
Mm,
And so that to me comes into the resistance piece is I love to operate every day with a beginner's mind. Like I don't know anything. And I think that itself opens up a whole world of possibilities and opportunities that you may not have considered before.
mm. It's such a good reminder. It's so tempting to think that we know a tool, and that's something I know I constantly work on myself on, is it's tempting when you have 180 tools or 200 tools or 10 tools to just automatically go, at least my brain does, apply tool. But let's show for any amount of time, there are many tools either our guests have shared or that I have shared. And yet sometimes just having curiosity can be so powerful because that one question, rather than giving somebody a tool and trying to
Mhm.
fix or change something, giving someone a question that allows them to illuminate from the inside out whatever the answer is can be the greatest gift, stronger than any tool we could offer.
I 100% agree. 100%.
I love that, Tracy. So if people want to connect with you, if they want to learn about your coaching services, how to be one of the clients that you work with, or in general to learn more about the work you do, how would they do that?
Yeah, I am on Instagram. I am Tracy Yates. My website is Tracy-Yates. LinkedIn is the same. And I'm also launching a podcast in a few weeks called The Big Picture.
Mm.
So you can find me there as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tracy. I'm so grateful that you shared your wisdom on building wealth, on what it takes to have a frequency of success. And no matter who you are and where you are tuning in, when you're listening or watching this, my intention for you is that you pluck that string, that frequency of success, and that it reverberates with you and for you for the rest of your life. I'm Jennifer Cahill, and I thank you for your time.